California is facing a crisis unlike anything seen in decades. A $50 billion housing fund designed to tackle one of the state's most urgent problems has been completely blocked, leaving millions of residents trapped in uncertainty. Right now, over 3.5 million Californians are on waiting lists for affordable housing, and the delay of this massive fund could mean homelessness, skyrocketing rents, and overburdened public services for years to come. Governor Gavin Newsom and state lawmakers promised this fund would be a game changer, a lifeline for families struggling to pay rent, for essential workers, and for communities devastated by natural disasters. Instead, political feuds within the parties have created a deadlock that stalls the allocation of these billions, turning what was meant to be a solution into a symbol of inaction. This is not a problem for someone else. It is happening in your state, your neighborhood, and affecting your community. The stakes could not be higher. Families are being forced into temporary shelters, parents are struggling to keep children in the same school year after year, and essential workers, including nurses, firefighters, and teachers, are commuting hours because housing near their jobs has become unaffordable. In Los Angeles County alone, homelessness has jumped 12% in the last year, fueled in part by stalled housing projects. And the $50 billion fund, which could have created hundreds of thousands of new housing units, is sitting frozen amid political maneuvering. The blockage is not simply a matter of bureaucratic delay. Reports from internal audits reveal that more than $1.2 billion in contracts for housing projects have been paused, leaving construction sites abandoned, workers without pay, and contractors facing insolvency. Meanwhile, some of the fund's allocations were quietly redirected to urban districts favored by political insiders, leaving the most vulnerable communities, low-income families, single mothers, and senior citizens without the support they desperately need. The human impact is immediate. In San Francisco, families are moving into overcrowded apartments, often doubling or tripling up just to survive. In Sacramento, teachers report that students are showing up late or skipping school because they have nowhere stable to live. Across the state, hospitals are strained as medical staff cannot afford housing near their workplaces, forcing emergency departments to operate with critical staffing shortages. Economic consequences are cascading. The California construction industry, one of the state's largest employers, is losing momentum as stalled projects tie up billions in potential wages and revenue. Local businesses, especially in rental-heavy areas, face shrinking customer bases as tenants are displaced or forced to leave entirely. Estimates suggest that California could lose $3 billion annually in economic activity due to halted housing projects alone. Yet, despite the mounting evidence of human suffering and economic strain, political leaders remain locked in a bitter feud. Governors, assembly leaders, and committee chairs continue to debate the distribution and priorities of the fund rather than taking immediate action. For the average Californian, these political battles are more than just headlines. They are the difference between a roof over their head or a night on the street. The situation is urgent, and the fallout is already visible. With hundreds of thousands of Californians waiting, thousands of new housing units delayed, and billions of dollars frozen in limbo, the state stands on the edge of a housing catastrophe. And while citizens struggle, the very politicians entrusted with resolving this crisis are still entrenched in partisan battles, leaving millions of residents to face the consequences. California's housing fund was meant to be a lifeline. Instead, it has become a flashpoint for political infighting, exposing the fragility of systems that millions rely on every day. The question is not whether the situation will worsen. It already has. The only unknown is how far it will go before decisive action finally breaks through the deadlock. The $50 billion housing fund did not collapse overnight. Behind the headlines lies a tangled web of internal party conflicts, bureaucratic inertia, and strategic power plays that have paralyzed progress. At the heart of the crisis are deep divisions within the state's Democratic Party, splitting lawmakers into competing factions over control of the fund, allocation priorities, and oversight mechanisms. On one side are moderates pushing for rapid deployment to urban centers facing the highest homelessness rates, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Oakland. They argue that speed is essential to prevent thousands more families from losing housing. On the other side, progressive lawmakers demand stricter regulations, claiming that without aggressive environmental and labor safeguards, projects risk mismanagement and profiteering. These disputes, once internal, have now spilled into public hearings, press conferences, and social media, creating a climate of uncertainty and delay. Reports from legislative insiders reveal that over 120 proposals for project funding were tabled or voted down due to partisan disagreements, even though many had already passed preliminary vetting. Officials in the governor's office confirm that internal emails show repeated warnings about stalling deadlines, but factional leaders prioritized political leverage over immediate action. One senior staffer admitted on record that some decisions are being held hostage to strengthen negotiating positions rather than to house families. Beyond party lines, bureaucratic failures compound the problem. Several departments responsible for processing housing contracts are facing staffing shortages, outdated systems, and procedural bottlenecks. A recent audit revealed that nearly $5 billion earmarked for local housing projects is now in limbo, stuck in internal review with no clear timeline for disbursement. Meanwhile, construction firms and nonprofit developers report mounting costs as project delays force inflation adjustments and contract renegotiations. The political theater is intensifying. Assembly leaders have reportedly withheld approvals on specific allocations to urban districts in exchange for concessions on unrelated budget items. Committee chairs are publicly feuding over control of subcommittees tasked with fund oversight. Every hearing becomes a battleground and every vote a potential flashpoint. Meanwhile, the public receives conflicting statements. Press releases promise rapid deployment, while internal memos warn that projects cannot start for months. The consequences of this political deadlock are tangible. Planned housing projects for more than 200 units are delayed indefinitely. Developers have halted construction on affordable housing complexes in Los Angeles County, citing uncertainty over funding. Families that were counting on these homes now face eviction or prolonged stays in overcrowded shelters. And with inflation in California housing costs rising by 7.8% over the last year, delays translate into higher prices and deeper insecurity for renters. Even more shocking, internal reports indicate that political negotiations have allowed millions of dollars in earmarked funding to remain idle, while advocacy groups and housing nonprofits warn that every week of inaction magnifies the humanitarian crisis. Los Angeles alone reports a 10% increase in homelessness this quarter, fueled in part by these frozen projects. Meanwhile, state officials continue to publicly assure residents that solutions are on the way, masking the reality that internal squabbles are the real obstacle. This isn't just mismanagement, it's a crisis engineered by political power struggles. Party leaders have transformed a life-saving fund into a leverage tool, weaponizing bureaucratic processes for negotiation points and electoral advantage. Families, workers, and communities are caught in the crossfire, forced to endure the fallout while political leaders debate who gets to control the billions. The California Housing Fund was meant to be a solution to one of the state's most urgent problems. Instead, it has become a mirror of internal party conflict, revealing how fragile governance can be when politics overtakes public need. With tens of thousands of families at risk and billions of dollars stalled, the fallout of these feuds is already hitting communities hard, and there's no guarantee it will end soon. The consequences of the stalled housing fund are no longer just numbers on a page. They are unfolding in the lives of real families across California. Tens of thousands of people who were promised stable homes now face eviction, overcrowded shelters, or the dangerous streets of Los Angeles, Oakland, and San Francisco. According to the California Homelessness Report 2025, homelessness in major urban centers has surged by 12% in the last 6 months alone, a direct reflection of delayed housing projects and frozen funds. Parents describe desperate choices, leaving jobs to care for children in shelters, relying on friends or extended family, or moving into tiny, unsafe apartments. One mother in South Los Angeles told local reporters that her family of 4 had been bounced between temporary housing for 6 months, while the construction of a promised affordable complex remained in limbo. Her story mirrors thousands across the state, turning statistics into a human crisis. Schools are also feeling the impact. Districts across California report that students are being pulled from schools due to unstable housing, forcing administrators to manage fluctuating enrollments mid-year. Over 15,000 students in Los Angeles Unified alone are now considered housing insecure, affecting academic performance, access to meals, and mental health resources. Teachers and counselors face mounting stress, attempting to fill gaps while budgets remain frozen. Economically, the fallout is staggering. Construction firms and developers have had to halt work on nearly 50 large-scale affordable housing projects, citing uncertainty over the release of billions in funding. This stoppage alone has put thousands of jobs at risk, from construction workers to subcontractors, suppliers, and local service industries. One industry report estimates that delayed housing projects could cost California over $3 billion in lost economic activity in the next 12 months, a number growing daily as political deadlock drags on. Small businesses in affected neighborhoods are already struggling. Stores near planned housing developments report declining foot traffic as residential construction delays keep potential customers away. Grocery shops, daycare centers, and health clinics, all reliant on local population growth, face revenue drops, compounding the economic stress. Meanwhile, landlords in more affluent districts are raising rents, knowing that families displaced from stalled projects have limited options, widening inequality in the state. Public confidence is eroding. Polls indicate that over 60% of Californians distrust political leadership to solve the housing crisis, with frustration intensifying as delays mount. Advocacy groups accuse lawmakers of letting politics dictate policy, while vulnerable families suffer. Even state officials concede privately that the current process has exposed the fragility of governance under political pressure. Acknowledging that every stalled vote and partisan feud has tangible human costs, health services are under pressure as well. Clinics serving homeless populations report increased patient loads, from respiratory illnesses to mental health crises exacerbated by housing instability. Hospitals in Los Angeles County have seen emergency room visits rise by 8% among patients experiencing housing insecurity, creating strain on healthcare staff and resources. The stalled $50 billion fund, designed as a lifeline, has instead become a symbol of systemic failure. Political infighting and bureaucratic inertia have turned potential solutions into delays that reverberate across the economy and communities. Families remain trapped, jobs are jeopardized, and entire neighborhoods feel the ripple effects. The question haunting Californians is no longer when will help arrive. It is how much longer will leadership allow this human and economic fallout to grow. The finger pointing has begun, and the political fallout is as explosive as the crisis itself. At the heart of the deadlock are California's top Democratic leaders, whose infighting has stalled the $50 billion housing fund for months. Governor Gavin Newsom, who initially championed the plan, is facing mounting criticism from within his own party, with progressive lawmakers accusing the administration of prioritizing elite housing developers over families in need. Internal memos leaked to the press show that key committee votes were delayed multiple times, not due to opposition from Republicans, but because of strategic maneuvering between factions of same party. Legislative leaders in Sacramento, including Assembly Speaker Anthony Rendon and Senate President pro tempore Tony Atkins, are now under scrutiny. Publicly, they tout unity and urgency. "We are committed to solving the housing crisis," one press release declared, but behind closed doors, emails and meeting notes reveal bitter disagreements over funding allocation, project oversight, and developer contracts. Advocates claim that these internal battles have paralyzed the system, leaving millions of dollars frozen and families in limbo. The controversy extends beyond political theater. Key audits, obtained by investigative journalists, show that certain earmarked funds were redirected temporarily to other state projects, while the housing program awaited final approval. Meanwhile, city officials in Los Angeles and San Francisco report being left in the dark, unable to move forward on approved local projects because state-level approvals were stalled due to partisan negotiations. One LA City housing official described the situation bluntly. "We have buildings ready to break ground, the money exists, the people are ready, but the politics, it's a roadblock at every step." Public outrage is intensifying. Opinion polls show that nearly 65% of Californians now feel betrayed by their own party, with frustration highest among moderate and progressive voters who expected leadership to deliver concrete solutions. Social media campaigns highlight families forced to double up in apartments, elderly residents in shelters, and construction workers facing layoffs. Grassroots organizations have called the delays a betrayal of public trust and demanded transparency on internal decision-making. The stark contrast between public messaging and the reality on the ground is fueling anger. While official statements emphasize collaboration and efficiency, leaked reports reveal that weeks of negotiations over minor contractual clauses and project approvals have blocked billions from reaching those who need it most. One senator's staff member admitted on record, "It's not that we don't care, it's that no one wants to give the other faction a win, and the families they get caught in the middle." Even as California faces a mounting human and economic crisis, those responsible remain in power, deflecting blame externally while battles rage internally. Experts warn that unless decisive action is taken, this political deadlock could extend the crisis, leaving housing projects incomplete and vulnerable populations unprotected for years. The situation has become a chilling case study in how partisan politics can override urgent public need, showing the full scale of damage when internal party feuds take precedence over people's lives. The future looks bleak if this political stalemate continues. Experts warn that millions of Californians could remain without affordable housing for years, worsening an already staggering crisis. In Los Angeles alone, the number of unhoused residents has climbed past 70,000, with families doubling up in overcrowded apartments and children growing up without stable shelter. Without the $50 billion fund being released, planned projects for low-income housing in San Francisco, Sacramento, and other urban hubs are at risk of cancellation, leaving construction crews unemployed and city economies hemorrhaging. Healthcare could also feel the impact. Hospitals and community clinics, many of which depend on state-backed housing programs to stabilize populations, are reporting strain. Experts estimate that delayed housing projects correlate with a 15–20% increase in emergency room visits among homeless populations, adding pressure to an already overburdened healthcare system. The economic decline isn't just hypothetical. Analysts project that billions in stalled construction contracts, developer payments, and ancillary services will vanish if the fund remains locked, affecting local suppliers, transportation companies, and countless small businesses tied to construction and development. This isn't just numbers on a page, it's real money lost, jobs evaporating, and communities destabilized. Inequality will widen dramatically. While political factions squabble over fund allocations, wealthy developers and those with political connections continue to thrive, leaving average Californians behind. The gap between opportunity and reality grows wider every day that the fund sits idle, and for many families, the promise of homeownership or even stable rent drifts further out of reach. California is at a crossroads. The choice isn't theoretical, it's urgent, personal, and measurable. Leadership can act decisively to release funds, push projects forward, and stabilize communities. Or the state can continue down this path of political infighting, leaving tens of thousands of families trapped in limbo, healthcare systems under siege, and local economies crumbling. The question isn't whether the crisis will get worse. It's how long the public will tolerate inaction. Will internal party disputes continue to dictate the future of millions of lives, or will accountability finally force real solutions? For viewers, the stakes are immediate. Families without homes, children without safe schools, workers without jobs. This is not a distant problem. It's happening in your state, and until action is taken, the fallout will continue to spread, quietly devastating communities while political players protect their own interests. Visuals for this section should hit hard: dark cityscapes with empty construction sites, contrast charts showing projected homelessness growth, and infographics of frozen funds versus pending projects. Dramatic music should underscore the urgency, leaving viewers both shocked and compelled to engage with the reality of the crisis.